The fog in London never just hung in the air. It invaded. It crept into your lungs like smoke, clung to your throat with the bitterness of coal, and lingered no matter how hard you coughed. But in 1953, Baker Street's fog carried something strange, something sweeter. It curled through the gas lamps and rattled windows with the warm, sugary breath of a little bakery called the Golden Crust. The bakery sat at 221B Baker Street, like a crown jewel on a crooked tooth. Its windows steamed over, glowing faintly yellow against the soot-black bricks. Every morning, even before the bells of St. Mary's chimed 6, there was a line, a crooked, shivering snake of Londoners stretching down the block. Women in scarves, men with flat caps tilted low, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, all waiting, always waiting, for their taste of Edmund Grayer's miracles. Grayer himself stood inside, a plump man with iron-grey hair and a smile so warm it could melt butter on a stone. His apron was dusted in flour, his sleeves rolled, and his hands worked the dough like a priest blessing sacrament. He whistled, sometimes hummed as he baked. The sound carried out through the vents, mixing with the fog. To the city, he wasn't just a baker. He was a healer, a magician. People whispered that a bite of his tarts could ease a broken heart, that his breadsticks could quiet a fever, that his chocolate loaves were better than medicine. Arthur Halloway had never seen anything quite like it. Not in Manchester, not in the war-ravaged fields of France, not even in his darker travels as a detective for Scotland Yard. He stood with his wife, Margaret, and his daughter Eleanor in the snaking line one September morning, the smell of cinnamon rolling off the bakery like a tide. Eleanor tugged his hand, her small fingers sticky with excitement. "Papa, can we get the lemon tarts?" she asked, eyes wide, voice full of the breathless urgency only a 10-year-old can conjure. Arthur smiled faintly, though he was tired from the move, tired from life itself. "We'll see, Ellie," he murmured. "We'll see what Mr. Grayer has left." Margaret tucked her arm into his and leaned her head against his shoulder, whispering, "She hasn't been this happy since the funeral back home." Arthur flinched at the word funeral, though Margaret had said it gently. They'd buried his mother just 2 months before moving here. Eleanor, too young to fully grasp the permanence of death, had asked why Nana wouldn't wake up, why the dirt had to cover her face. He'd had no answer then, and he still had none. Inside the Golden Crust, the heat hit them like a wall. The air smelled of sugar and yeast, butter and something darker underneath. Not rot exactly, but a thickness, a heaviness, like meat roasted too long. Arthur brushed it aside. Everyone else was too busy smiling, sighing, biting into their pastries with moans of delight. Edmund Grayer himself came to the counter. His voice boomed cheerfully, like a friendly butcher calling out the day's cuts. "What'll it be today, eh? Tarts, bread, scones hot from the oven. Don't be shy. We've enough for everyone." The fog rolled thicker over Baker Street the night after Eleanor's grave was found empty, thick enough to swallow gaslight, thick enough to muffle footsteps. Arthur stood there for hours, his coat collar turned up, the lantern trembling in his hand. His wife begged him to come home, her voice cracking through her tears. "Arthur, please, please, you'll catch your death out here," she whispered desperately. But Arthur didn't move. Couldn't. By morning, the whispers began. Not loud, not bold, but soft little threads of gossip passed between lips like contraband. The church sexton swore he had seen nothing. The groundskeeper said the soil was loose already, must have caved in. Lies. Arthur had dug graves himself in France during the war. He knew disturbed earth when he saw it. That night, standing near the churchyard, he saw a shape moving through the fog. Tall, broad, carrying something slung over the shoulder. Arthur's heart hammered as he squinted, lantern light struggling to cut the mist. The figure vanished into the smoke of the city. The next morning, Arthur did what he always did when the world made no sense. He investigated. He questioned the neighbors first, his voice steady, though his hands trembled beneath the table where no one could see. A boy, ragged, dirt-streaked cheeks, hair wild, claimed he saw a man in white near the cemetery after dark. "White, you say?" Arthur asked sharply, leaning forward, his voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. "Yes, sir. White, like flour. His sleeves all dusty." The boy whispered, eyes darting, as though afraid the fog itself was listening. The boy's mother yanked him back, snapping, "Don't go filling the detective's head with nonsense. You'll get us in trouble." Trouble. The words stuck in Arthur's mind like a burr. By noon, Arthur stood in line outside the Golden Crust, not because he was hungry, but because the smell called to him. Warm bread, sugared buns, cinnamon rolling out of the door like perfume. He hated himself for salivating, hated himself more when his stomach growled. Inside, the bakery was packed, every table filled with laughing faces. Men dunked bread into tea, women bit into golden crusts, children's mouths smeared with jam. And there, behind the counter, smiling, benevolent, stood Edmund Greer. Arthur felt his throat tighten the moment their eyes met. "Ah, Detective Halloway, isn't it?" Greer said warmly, wiping his hands on his flour-dusted apron. "London's newest resident. My condolences, sir. Truly, I mean that. I heard about your little one." Arthur froze. "You heard?" he asked slowly, voice low, his heart drumming. Greer nodded, head tilted, eyes soft as butter left in the sun. "All of Baker Street hears such things. We are a family here. When one suffers, we all suffer." Arthur's jaw clenched, but Eleanor's voice whispered in memory. "Papa, can we get the lemon tarts?" And he found himself stammering. "A loaf of bread. Just the plain white." Greya chuckled, warm as a hearth fire. "Plain? Nonsense. No one leaves the golden crust with just plain." He leaned closer, lowering his voice as though sharing a holy secret. "Here, on the house, lemon tart for your daughter's memory." Arthur's hands shook as he accepted the small paper bag, warm, fragrant. He tasted it that evening, sitting alone at the kitchen table, while Margaret wept herself to sleep. The pastry was divine, sweet enough to sting his teeth, tart enough to bring tears to his eyes. And yet, beneath the sugar, beneath the lemon, there was something else, something faint, something that made him push the plate away in horror. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve, his body trembling. "God help me," he whispered hoarsely. "It tastes like her." Arthur's investigation deepened over the next days. He studied delivery ledgers, flour shipments, sugar rations. The numbers didn't match. The bakery sold 10 times more than what was being delivered. And then came the whispers again, louder this time, harder to ignore. "Pet's gone missing, that's true. My neighbor's daughter vanished last year, never found her. They say he roams the cemetery at night." "Don't talk like that. Mr. Greya is a saint, I tell you." Arthur walked the streets, his coat soaked in fog and rain, every whispered word twisting inside him like a blade. When he passed the bakery late one night, lantern dim, he heard the ovens roar inside, louder than any oven should, louder than fire itself. And from the alley, where the fog hung low, he found it. A ribbon. Eleanor's ribbon. Pale blue, sugar-stained at the edges. Arthur sank to his knees, clutching it in his fist, his voice breaking apart into the mist. "You bastard! You bastard! I'll find you." Behind him, faint and almost mocking, came the smell of sweet bread, drifting out of the golden crust, like laughter. Arthur Halloway hadn't slept properly in days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands unsteady. The ribbon lay on the nightstand beside him, blue once, now dulled by dirt and a faint sugar stain that mocked him with every glance. He touched it sometimes in the dark, whispering Eleanor's name under his breath. "Ellie. Ellie, my sweet girl." Margaret begged him to let it go. "Arthur, please. We've already buried her once. Don't bury us with her," she cried, her voice cracked raw, her fingers clawing at his sleeve, as though she could drag him back into sanity. But Arthur shook her off, his voice low, determined. "They took her. Someone took her. and I'll tear the city apart before I stop. He buried himself in the ledgers, flour deliveries, sugar shipments, egg orders. The numbers screamed lies at him. The golden crust produced far more than it received. Dough did not multiply on its own. Sugar did not conjure itself out of the fog. At Scotland Yard he pulled files, cases shoved into dusty drawers, yellowed pages telling of disappearances. Children, vagrants, the occasional lonely woman, all within walking distance of Baker Street, all dismissed as runaways or bad luck. His colleagues eyed him with pity. "Arthur, you're grieving, mate," one said softly. "Don't do this to yourself." Arthur slammed the file shut so hard, dust leapt into the air. "Don't tell me what I'm doing," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Tell me why no one's asked where they went." No answer came. At night, he followed Greyer. The baker always left the golden crust late, apron still tied, sleeves dusted white. Arthur trailed him through the fog, every step measured, every nerve strung tight. He saw him once, swore he saw him, slip into the churchyard, carrying a sack slung over his shoulder, heavy, dragging. Arthur's chest clenched as he crouched behind the wrought iron fence, breath shallow. The ovens roared that night, louder than before, belching heat so fierce Arthur felt it even in the street. He stood outside the bakery, fists trembling, wanting to break down the door, to drag the truth out of Greyer with his bare hands. But fear rooted him. Not fear of the man, but fear of what he would find. Margaret confronted him one evening, her face hollow from sleepless nights. "Arthur, you're frightening me," she whispered, her hands clasped in front of her as if in prayer. "You mutter to yourself. You stare at nothing. You hardly eat, hardly breathe. Is this what Eleanor would want?" Arthur turned on her, his voice ragged, louder than he meant. "Don't speak her name like that. Don't you dare tell me what Eleanor would want. She's gone, Margaret, and no one cares but me." Margaret flinched, tears spilling. She backed away, shaking her head, whispering, "No, Arthur. It's not just you losing her. It's not just you." He hated himself for the hurt in her eyes, but he hated Greyer more. The next night Arthur found another clue. Behind the golden crust, in the narrow alley where shadows clung to the bricks, he crouched low and listened. The back door creaked open, and Greyer stepped out, humming as though he hadn't a care in the world. He carried another sack, dripping faintly, leaving a dark trail on the cobblestones. Arthur moved closer, holding his breath. He bent down, touched the damp patch on the stones, and when he lifted his fingers, they glistened red in the lantern light. His breath caught. "God Almighty," he muttered, his hand shaking. And then he saw it. snagged on the edge of the sack as Greya hoisted it back inside. A scrap of fabric, pale blue, frilled at the edge. Arthur staggered back, bile rising in his throat. It was Eleanor's nightdress. He would swear it on his own grave. That night, Arthur couldn't hold back the rage boiling inside him. He stormed into his flat, slamming the door, his voice a growl. It's him. It's Greya. He took her. He used her. Margaret's face went white as bone. She shook her head violently, her hands pressed over her ears as though she could block the words. "Stop, stop, stop," she begged, her voice breaking. "You're losing your mind, Arthur. Please, stop before you destroy us both." But Arthur only gripped the ribbon tighter, his teeth clenched, his eyes burning with fevered light. "I'll prove it. I'll drag him down to hell if I have to." The words trembling but certain. Outside, in the fog-choked street, the sweet smell of bread drifted again, thick, cloying, and inescapable. And Arthur knew then that his hunger for truth was far greater and far more dangerous than the town's hunger for Greya's bread. The night was wet, not with rain, but with the kind of fog that clung to your coat and crept into your lungs like something alive. Arthur stood across from the golden crust, collar turned up, the blue ribbon clenched in his pocket until his knuckles ached white. The bakery glowed faintly, lantern light flickering against the window glass. Inside, shadows moved. One, heavy, deliberate. Greya. Arthur whispered into the mist, as though speaking to Eleanor herself. "I'm coming, Ellie. I'll find the truth. I swear it." His voice cracked, breaking under the weight of grief and fury. He moved quick, crouched low, back door in sight. The wood was dark, swollen with years of steam and smoke, but the lock was nothing more than an old iron latch. Arthur's hands shook as he slid a thin piece of metal between the gap, prying, cursing under his breath. The door groaned open. The smell hit him at once, a hot, cloying sweetness that turned his stomach. Bread, sugar, and something darker underneath. Metallic, meaty, like copper coins held too long in the hand. Arthur gagged, pressing his sleeve against his mouth. "Dear God," he muttered, but still he stepped inside. The ovens were alive. Great, iron-bellied beasts, glowing orange, their heat pressing down like a fever. Racks of bread loaves lined the walls, golden crusts gleaming in the firelight. He reached for one, hesitated, then pulled back, as though the bread might burn him through touch alone. He crept deeper, the floor sticky in places, his boots leaving faint, wet marks behind him. He bent down, running his hand across the flagstones, then jerked it back. His fingertips glistened, red-brown, tacky, even after years of detective work had taught him not to flinch. Arthur whispered to himself, his voice shaking. Not flour, not water, not sugar. The humming started then, a low tune, off-key, drifting down the corridor. Arthur froze, heart hammering, sweat running cold despite the heat. Grea's voice, humming like a mother might hum to her child in a cradle. Arthur pressed himself against the wall, edging toward the sound. His hand slid to the revolver tucked in his coat, though he wasn't sure if he'd even fire. The corridor opened into a cellar stairwell. And there, oh God, there was the smell, heavy and undeniable now. Gray descended slowly, sack over his shoulder, wet, sagging, dripping onto the stairs one drop at a time. Drip, drip, drip. Arthur's breath hitched, his throat closing tight. He leaned forward, peering down into the cellar's glow. It was worse than he'd ever imagined. Tables lined with knives, cleavers, hooks, not shining clean but dull with stains. Slabs of meat wrapped in brown paper, stacked neatly as though in preparation for sale. A butcher's room pretending to be a kitchen. And on the far table, Arthur staggered, his knees threatening to give. A small arm lay on the wood, pale and stiff, no larger than Eleanor's had been. He pressed a fist to his mouth, biting back a cry. But a sound escaped anyway. A strangled, broken noise that bounced off the stone walls. Gray turned, slowly, deliberately, the humming cutting off in an instant. His eyes met Arthur's through the stairwell gloom. Calm eyes, grey as ash. "Well," Gray said softly, his voice smooth, almost kind. "I was wondering how long it would take before you came sniffing." Arthur's hand shot to his revolver, fumbling, his voice torn between rage and despair. "You bastard! You monster! What did you do to her? Where's Eleanor?" He shouted, his voice echoing, breaking against the cellar walls. Gray didn't flinch. He set the sack down on the table with a wet slap, his hands slow, deliberate. "Names, they blur after a while," he murmured, almost wistful. "But the flavor, the flavor never does." Arthur's stomach turned, bile rising. He raised the revolver, his hand shaking so hard the barrel wavered. "I'll kill you. I'll blow your goddamn head off right here," he growled, teeth bared like an animal. But Gray only smiled, a thin, dreadful smile that reached no part of his eyes. "Shoot then, but you'll never know which loaf she was in." Arthur's scream ripped out of him, raw and broken. "You devil!" His finger twitched on the trigger. and that was when the cellar door above slammed shut with a crash that shook the walls, plunging them deeper into the heat and the stink of the golden crust. The slam of the cellar door echoed like a gunshot. Arthur spun, revolver raised, sweat stinging his eyes. The heat in the room seemed to swell, pressing on his chest until his breath came shallow, ragged. Greer stood perfectly still, hands folded behind his back as though this were no more than a casual evening's conversation. His lips curved in that thin smile again, his voice calm, almost teasing. Locked in now, Mr. Halloway. No way out but through. Arthur snarled, his voice breaking with rage. Through you, then. I'll carve the truth out of your throat if I have to. Greer chuckled, low, dry, humorless. Oh, detective, you've been so blinded by grief you don't see it, do you? You're already caught. You walked right into the oven. He stepped closer, the lantern glow painting his face in molten gold, shadows deepening the hollows beneath his eyes. His apron, God, his apron, was smeared with streaks not of flour, but of something darker, dried into brown-black patches that no soap could wash clean. Arthur tightened his grip on the revolver, the barrel trembling. "Where is she?" he shouted, voice raw, veins standing out in his neck. "Tell me what you did. Tell me." Greer tilted his head, studying him. "I baked her," he said softly, without shame, without pause. "Just like all the others. The town has already eaten her, Arthur, savored her, praised her. She's part of them now." Arthur staggered, choking on air, bile rising in his throat. His hand shook so violently, he nearly dropped the revolver. "Liar, you're lying," but he wasn't sure anymore. The sweetness in the air clung to him, filled his nostrils, coated his tongue until he wanted to scream. He pressed the barrel of the gun against Greer's chest, hard, furious. Greer only whispered, leaning closer, "Go on then. Pull the trigger. Send us both to hell." The ovens roared louder, a blast of heat surging as if the very walls breathed fire. Arthur's head spun. The air was thick, suffocating. He pulled the trigger. Nothing. Arthur's eyes widened, a choked gasp escaping him. He pulled again, each hollow sound hammering his panic higher. Greer's laughter broke loose then, booming, echoing, filling the cellar like the ovens themselves had learned to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. Empty, detective. Oh, you poor fool. Walking in with an empty gun." Arthur stumbled back, heart thundering, revolver useless in his hand. No, I checked. "I loaded," he muttered, half to himself, half to Eleanor's ghost. Greer moved faster than his bulk suggested, seizing a cleaver from the table. He raised it high, the blade catching the glow, and brought it down hard on the table with a crack that shook the wood. "This is my kitchen, Mr. Halloway," he roared, spit flying, eyes blazing wild. "And in my kitchen, I decide who feeds who." Arthur lunged sideways, slamming into a rack of loaves, bread scattering, crusts splitting open. He scrambled, grabbing for anything, a knife, a pan, anything with weight, while Greer stalked after him, humming that damned lullaby again, the sound warping in the heat. Arthur's hand closed around a rolling pin slick with something sticky. He swung it wildly, connecting with Greer's shoulder. The baker grunted, staggered, but the smile never left his lips. "You've got fight. I like that," Greer hissed, circling him like a wolf. "But fight won't change what's already been swallowed." Arthur's vision blurred. Sweat, smoke, tears, he couldn't tell. He darted for the stairwell, slamming against the locked door, pounding with both fists. "Help! Someone help me!" he begged, voice breaking against the wood. No answer. Only the heat, the humming, and the steady drag of Greer's boots across the stone floor. Arthur turned back, chest heaving, hair plastered to his temples. Greer stood beneath the glow of the lantern, cleaver in one hand, sack in the other. The sack shifted as he lifted it, something within thudding dully against the canvas. Greer whispered then, soft as a prayer, "Would you like to see her one last time?" Arthur's breath caught, a sob ripping free of him before he could stop it. "Show me, please," he begged, voice shredded, broken beyond pride. Greer's smile widened. He loosened the sack, tilting it just enough for something pale, something small, to roll into view. Arthur fell to his knees, the ribbon clenched so tightly in his fist it cut into his palm. His scream tore through the cellar, raw and endless, swallowed by the roar of the ovens. Arthur's scream echoed in the stone belly of the golden crust, ragged, endless, a cry of grief so sharp it carved through the roar of the ovens. He pressed his hands to his face, but he could still see it. Small, pale, limp, the thing Greer had taunted him with from the sack. Eleanor, or what was left of her. Greer loomed above him, the cleaver glinting, his shadow stretched long and monstrous by the firelight. His voice came low, almost gentle. "She fed them well, Arthur. The town will sing her praises with full bellies and happy hearts. Isn't that what every father wants, for his child to be remembered?" Arthur staggered to his feet, chest heaving, eyes bloodshot, voice breaking into a snarl. You're not God. You're filth. You're nothing. He lunged, wild, desperate. Greyer swung the cleaver, but Arthur ducked low, barreling into him with a strength born of madness. They crashed against the butcher's table, knives scattering, bread loaves toppling onto the blood-slick floor. Arthur's hand found a knife, long, jagged, cruel, and he plunged it forward, screaming Eleanor's name. The blade sank deep into Greyer's side. But Greyer didn't fall. He didn't even cry out. He grunted, breath hitching, then smiled again. Blood trickling from his mouth like wine. "Ah, you've given me flavor," he whispered, chuckling, even as his knees buckled. Arthur ripped the knife free, driving it down again and again, rage and grief twisting his face. "For Eleanor! For my girl! For my daughter!" he shouted, each word punctuated by the wet thud of blade against flesh. Finally, Greyer collapsed, sprawling across the stones, his smile still plastered on his face. Arthur stumbled back, panting, covered in sweat and blood, his hands shaking so violently the knife clattered from his grip. He pressed himself against the wall, gasping, staring at the still form on the floor. It was over. It had to be over. But then, a sound rose from the ovens. Not just the roar of flame, but something beneath it. A chorus, low, guttural, like dozens of voices moaning at once. Arthur froze, heart thundering. He turned wide-eyed to the glowing mouths of the iron beasts. The fire licked higher, shadows dancing madly across the walls, and in the flicker, he swore he saw faces, small, twisted faces, pressed against the oven doors, mouths open in silent screams. Eleanor's among them, her eyes wide, pleading, her lips shaping his name. Arthur staggered forward, reaching for the oven. "Ellie, Ellie, I'm here," he begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. He grabbed the handle, burning his skin, wrenching it open. A wave of heat blasted him, searing his lungs, forcing him back. He coughed, choking, eyes streaming. The interior glowed white-hot, empty. Nothing but ash, swirling in the infernal draught. He turned back to Greyer's body, but it was gone. The blood remained. The cleaver gleamed on the floor, but the baker's corpse had vanished. Only the faint sound of humming lingered in the air. That same lullaby, drifting through the cellar walls like smoke. Arthur clutched the ribbon in his fist, shaking, whispering to himself, "Not gone, not gone. He's still here." The door above creaked open. Footsteps on the stairs. Light spilling down. Arthur spun, knife back in his hand, teeth bared. ready for Grayer's return. But it wasn't Grayer. It was a constable, lantern in hand, staring at the blood-smeared detective in horror. "Arthur, my God, what have you done?" the man whispered, recoiling. Arthur blinked, trembling, his voice frantic, broken. It was him. It was Grayer. He took her. He killed them. All of them. Look at the ovens," he shouted, pointing wildly, spittle flying from his lips. The constable's lantern swept across the room, showing nothing but bread racks, flour sacks, and the dull glow of the ovens. No flesh, no cleavers, no scraps of bone. Arthur dropped the knife, his knees buckling. No, it was here. It was all here. The constable's eyes hardened. "Arthur Halloway, you're coming with me," he instructed, voice grim, hand tightening on the lantern pole. The golden crust still stood the next morning, smoke rising gentle from its chimney, the air thick with the smell of fresh bread, warm, comforting, ordinary. But Arthur Halloway didn't see ordinary anymore. He sat in his cell at Scotland Yard, head bowed, hands trembling. The ribbon lay crumpled on the cot beside him, streaked with his own blood. The constables whispered outside the bars about how they found him raving in the bakery cellar, knife in hand, eyes wild, shouting about ovens full of children. But when they went down, there was nothing. Only bread, cooling on the racks. Arthur muttered under his breath, rocking slightly. She was there. I saw her. She called to me. Ellie called. His voice cracked, trailing into silence. Margaret visited once, pale, gaunt, her eyes hollowed by grief and fear. She stood at the bars, fingers curled around cold iron. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They say you've lost your mind." Arthur lurched toward her, desperate, his voice a harsh plea. "Don't listen. Margaret, you have to believe me. Grayer, he did it. He took her." Margaret flinched at his words, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Our daughter is gone, Arthur, and now, so are you." Pulling back as if from something contagious, her footsteps faded, and Arthur felt himself hollow out further, as though his chest had been scraped clean. Meanwhile, on Baker Street, the Golden Crust opened its doors as it always had. Edmund Grayer, smiling, polite, dusting flour from his hands, greeted his customers one by one. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore. The usual? A dozen rolls? Good to see you, Mr. Clark. Try today's loaf, fresh from the oven. You'll love it." The townsfolk laughed, smiled, bit into their bread with pleasure. never tasting anything but perfection, never asking what made it so. From behind the counter, Grea's grey eyes flicked once toward the street, toward the police wagon rolling by with Arthur Halloway inside. His lips twitched into the faintest smile. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He sat on his cot, staring at the wall, muttering, "It wasn't madness. It wasn't. I know what I saw." And then, so soft he thought he imagined it, he heard it again. The humming, that lullaby, curling through the cracks of his mind, faint but steady, as if carried on the night air from Baker Street itself. Arthur pressed his palms to his ears, shaking, whispering to the dark, "Stop, stop, stop." But when he closed his eyes, oh God, when he closed them, he saw her face, Eleanor's face, pressed against the oven glass, lips moving soundlessly. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the golden crust, the ovens glowed, their heat alive, their mouths whispering with every rise of dough. No bodies, no blood, nothing that could be proven, only the taste left behind, sweet and irresistible. The townsfolk slept on full stomachs, content, never questioning why the bread of Baker Street was the finest in all of London. And in his cell, Arthur Halloway wept into the ribbon, whispering Eleanor's name, knowing no one would ever believe him. Thanks for sipping tonight's tale with Haunted Brew. Don't forget to subscribe, and sleep tight if you still can.